Okay, welcome to the penultimate week of class. We are on our, like I said, second to last week of class. In this week, we are going to be talking about food sustainability, food safety, and that kind of stuff. We're going to be covering two chapters this week again, chapters 12 and 13, both fairly short chapters this week. All right, so we're going to talk about consumerism, how we make our food choices, food advertising, and things like that. So as food consumers, we speak with our money, right? Our dollars are what the influence that we have over the food industry. So what we choose to purchase and choose not to purchase has an effect on the food market and food industry as a whole. But to try to influence us to buy certain products, food companies spend close to $10 billion annually to promote their particular products. A lot of what they spend money on advertising aren't nutritionally, healthy stuff. There's basically very, very little food advertising for whole foods, healthy foods like fresh fruits and veggies. Almost non-existent. The only one I can really think of off the top of my head is like the Florida oranges, for the Florida orange juice, and then the avocados from Mexico, that little jingle. Those are the only ones I can really think of. But otherwise, McDonald's spent 3 times as much advertising on their products as did advertising for fruit, vegetables, bottled water, and or milk. So 3 times more than those guys combined. So where does our food come from? Well, we live in Iowa, so we probably know a little bit about where food comes from. Most of it comes from small family-run farms here in the United States. So to be considered a farm, you have to produce and sell at least $1,000 of some sort of agricultural product per year. So it doesn't have to be a ton, just at least $1,000 a year of agricultural products. There are just over 2 million farms. We know we live, in the Midwest. So most of those are in the Midwest, the Great Plains, and California. However, the number of farms has been decreasing quite a bit. We have 67,000 fewer farms in 2017 than we did in 2012. And the numbers continue to drop for a variety of reasons. Farming is a difficult life. You're dependent upon nature and the weather to make your livelihood. And with climate change, a lot of the weather has become way less predictable and a lot more drastic swings in different types of weather, a lot more severe weather than we had in the past, which really obviously affects your ability to grow food here. So, it would make sense that the number of farms that people that are willing to put up with that kind of risk is getting fewer and fewer. So yeah, here's a little map of just roughly where one dot equals at least 200 farms here, and it shows you kind of where they are kind of clustered in the United States. All right, types of farms. We said small farms. To be considered a farm, excuse me, all you have to do is sell at least $1,000 of an agricultural product per year. Small farms are ones that sell less than $100,000 annually. And that is 82.1% of the total farms. So lots and lots of farms there. Large farms are more than $500,000 per year. That roughly takes up about 7.2% of the total farms. Now we do have, factory farms and large corporate farms and all of that stuff as well. But the vast majority of the farms in the United States are still family owned and family run. We talked about this a little bit. Farming is hard. It costs a lot to farm, to maintain your farm, to water your crops, to do all of that stuff. People don't want to pay a lot of money for food. People are all on budgets. Nobody has a lot of money these days. And so the farmers are trying to, do their best to grow food for the general populace and do so in a way that makes them money, but also doesn't cost an arm and a leg to the consumer. So it's difficult. And again, like I said, nature and with climate change, that has thrown an even larger wrench into the whole farming economy. So, technology can aid farmers. Computers and the internet allow for precision agriculture, meaning you can, precisely plan out your farm and plan out your farmland and grow what works in a particular area fairly precisely these days. But also one of the other things that we do to encourage people to continue farming is that our government subsidizes for commodity crops like corn, soybeans, and wheat. So they basically guarantee you a certain amount of money to grow and sell these particular crops. It's sort of like insurance for your business should you have a tornado that takes out all of your farmland. Most of what we grow in terms of plant crops, corn, soybeans, wheat, that kind of stuff, the vast majority of that is actually grown not to feed people, but to feed to animals that we would then eat later. So it's not the most efficient use of our fertile farmland, but here we are. So there's three top food crops in the US: corn, soybeans, and wheat. We're very familiar with corn and soybeans in Iowa. Yeah, most of the corn comes from the Corn Belt, so like Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, those types of states. Like I said, most of the corn ends up as food for livestock, poultry, and fish. So again, not a super efficient use of our farmland. We're not actually eating what we're growing. We're feeding them to other animals that we then kill and eat later on. So it's environmentally not super friendly practice there. 70% of soybeans are used to feed livestock. With wheat, obviously we use wheat for flour and for people who aren't lactose intolerant to make bread and pastas and flour and all kinds of things. And 70% of that is used for food, 22% for animal feed, and the rest of it to replenish the crop, so to have seed for the following year. So yeah, most of our staple crops we don't actually eat, we feed to other animals. As far as animal agriculture, this is a little bit more controversial, I think, in terms of farming, especially for people who are vegetarian or vegan. Animals are raised for food on feedlots. A lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are raised on feedlots, which means they don't really have access to natural fields and things like that they might have otherwise. They're just sort of fed grains and stuck in a building or in a muddy lot, and then when they get big enough, then they're killed. So not the greatest as far as ethical treatment and all of that kind of stuff. Maybe not the greatest life for those animals either. So yeah, a lot of what we grow, we eat here in the United States, but we do also export quite a lot of food to other countries as well. So US farmers help feed the world. An estimated 30% of farm income comes from foreign trade, so selling our products abroad. So it's roughly 30% of the farming income there. But the other problem is we maybe don't have the best health habits in the United States in terms of what we eat and that kind of stuff. So we're also exporting unhealthy eating habits to other countries across the globe as well. So shifting from maybe what they might normally eat with foods that they have access to naturally in their environment. We're shifting high calorie, high fat processed foods to other countries and leading to the spread of obesity worldwide, which we call globesity. It's becoming a global threat, not just a problem here in the US. All right. As far as food production outside the United States, most of the food that we eat here comes from here. So we definitely export more food than we import, but there's some stuff that we don't. have the appropriate environmental conditions to grow. Things like coffee, cocoa, a lot of fish and shellfish and spices are things that we can't readily grow with our particular environment here. So we import that from other countries. So like, chocolate and coffee, a lot of that stuff comes from abroad. Most of our coffee comes from Colombia and Brazil. We can, grow some coffee in Hawaii. Hawaii has, some coffee farms and that kind of stuff, but the most of it comes from sort of South America. All right. So the true primary reasons that we import food is because we want this constant access to a whole variety of foods. Um, and we want things that are less expensive. And oftentimes foods that are produced in other countries, we pay less for, and therefore they charge less for at the grocery store and that kind of stuff. But it comes with its own drawbacks. There's environmental cost of that long distance shipping, obviously a lot more um, uh, greenhouse gases and burning of fossil fuels and that kind of stuff when we are shipping things, from South America to Iowa. But that is sometimes the cost, I guess, that we're willing to pay to get the foods that we want year round. And then the other thing is in the US, we have, most of our products are fairly well inspected. We have as many safety measures as we can possibly get to help keep the food supply clean and, without infections and all of that kind of stuff. So potential food contamination from overseas because the FDA is not able to inspect every piece of food brought into the United States. So, we could potentially be spreading infection as well. So it's kind of led to, in the last, probably decade or so, some effort that is trying to address the various concerns that we have about agriculture. So producing food in a sustainable manner, one that addresses the concerns regarding the health of individuals, the community, and the environment, and provides adequate, healthy food for the world's population, and not only for now, but for generations to come. So what we're trying to do is feed everybody on the planet, ensure that we can continue to do so for the long run, do so safely and without harming the planet. So sustainable food systems have to be environmentally friendly, economically viable, so things can't cost so much that people can't afford to do it unless you're really, really rich, and socially equitable, meaning everybody should have equal access to these foods. All right, so a little more on sustainable food systems. There's concern about soil use. If we use our soil improperly, it degrades the topsoil, which means it takes all of the nutrients out of the topsoil and making it basically unable to grow food in the future. So doing things like crop rotation like we do in Iowa, because nitrogen is a big concern in terms of growing, corn and soybeans and things like that. Corn tends to leach the soil of important stuff like nitrogen, but soybeans actually will put nitrogen back in the soil. So if you rotate your crops, one year you plant corn, the next year you plant soybeans, you're trying to maintain the health of the topsoil that's important for growing food. Planting cover crops when you're not growing, not in your active growing season prevents soil erosion, which is another problem, and um, you know, um, buffers between your farmland and your water, which helps to prevent water contamination and water pollution from runoff from fields. So there's a lot of stuff that we have problems with in terms of farming and environment. Energy use, we're using fossil fuels, and that's harmful to the environment. Water use, water conservation is necessary. It's not an option. So, there are places, I think we looked at the water crisis video earlier in the semester when we talked about water. There are places in the United States even where there is a lot of fighting over access to fresh water, you know, and overuse of that particular water, so that now the Colorado River no longer flows into the Gulf of Mexico. It dries up before it ever gets to the Gulf of Mexico. So that's a big problem. Conservation of water is really, really important. Without water, we die. Reducing food waste is a part of sustainability as well. So, 30 to 40%, that's a huge number of all food produced is actually wasted. We actually don't end up eating it. It goes into the trash. So, you know, making better choices about what we're purchasing at the store and how much of it we're purchasing, and making a plan for our meals each week is important, not only for our budget, but also for the environment, and having a sustainable agricultural food system. And then being a more sustainable food consumer is also important. So, you know, the things that you personally can do would be to adopt a greener habit for you know, what you're consuming, what you're purchasing and consuming. One example here is eating less meat, because like I said, we are using a lot of our farmland to make crops that we feed other animals with, which again is not a very efficient use of our resources. Not only that, but also those you know, those large feedlots and things like that, those animals pollute the environment and create methane gas that creates, which is one of the major global warming greenhouse gases. So eating less meat in general is better on the environment. Eating closer to the earth, more plants, more local stuff. Go to the farmer's market. Try to you know, import or consume less imported food. Also is a way to kind of be a more conscientious consumer. So the most sustainable foods that we can have are locally grown and plant-based. Plant-based diets are also more health promoting, right? So eating a lot, the Mediterranean diet is primarily whole foods and plant-based, with smaller amounts of, you know, meat, chicken or fish or poultry once a week, and then red meat maybe once a month. It's better for your heart, it's better for your health, it's better for the environment. So eating locally grown plant-based diets are kind of the ideal for a sustainable food system. So where can you get food in your community? Farmers markets. We have an enormous farmers market that runs May through October in downtown Des Moines. It's enormous. And then we have other small ones as well. So farmers markets. And if you use EBT, a lot of the farmers market stands also accept EBT. So you can use your quote unquote food stamps at the farmers market just as well as you can use them at the grocery store. Other stuff like CSAs, community supported agriculture, that's where basically you kind of contract with a local farmer and they bring you certain amounts of produce, you know, once a week or whatever it is. So again, supporting local farmers. And we have several options for that in the metro as well. However, the one drawback, the one thing that you can do by eating more locally grown stuff is that there's less environmental impact from shipping, and you're also supporting the local economy. But you can't guarantee, unless you speak with the farmer, you can't guarantee that even if it's grown locally, that it's done in a way that's sustainable. So there's some drawbacks there, and some you know, effort that you have to put in if you want to be really conscientious about it. And then you might also see, like at Hy-Vee, I see periodically melons and corn and things like that that will have a little sign next to them that say, you know, this is grown by this farmer in Adel or in Grimes or whatever. So some local grocery stores do have contracts with local farmers as well, and that's another good way to get locally grown products. All right. As far as waste, strategies to stop wasting and start rescuing food at a restaurant order less, order smaller portions, order off of the lunch menu if you can, smaller portions there, order a couple of appetizers rather than a full meal, or a three-course meal, to reduce the amount of waste that's happening there. So you can kind of read through these. These are small things that you can do yourself to cut down on food waste. One of the other things you can do if you want to ensure that your food is grown in a environmentally responsible manner, is grow it yourself. So with COVID-19, one of the big things that people did was like plant gardens. And if they don't have, a big backyard to plant a garden in, planting gardens in containers, little container gardens. You really don't need much space. You just need a container to put stuff in. You need some soil, whatever type of plants you want to grow. You want some fertilizer, some water, and then just basically tending to the plants, giving them water when they need it, but not too much water. And then harvesting it. There's not a lot that goes along with that, but you just walk out onto your deck and pick your tomatoes and walk back into the house and use them. So there's no better sort of farm to table than growing it yourself. And it's pretty easy to do. So this will tell you kind of what you might need and how long it might take to get a harvest from a particular set of different types of vegetables here. All right. So one of our concerns also is having enough food to feed our growing global population. We have a huge number of people, and we already are having difficulty making sure that everyone has access to food. So some of the things that we tend to do are try to alter the food in different ways, genetically, or using chemicals or hormones to do that, to get the most yield out of the food products that we can currently grow with the amount of farmland we currently have. So cost and benefits of using hormones. These would be hormones that we use on animal agriculture here. So in cows, they might use bovine growth hormone or its synthetic version, recombinant bovine somatotropin, to stimulate milk production. So getting more milk from each cow. We haven't found, the FDA hasn't really discovered any actual serious negative side effects from those, but people don't really like, artificially hormonally treated products. So some consumers question the safety of it. There's not any good evidence at this point that it is harmful necessarily, but is it better for you? Probably not. You might see on dairy products or on, meat packaging some information about hormones and antibiotic use. So no artificial growth hormone and that kind of stuff. Antibiotics are used for three purposes. If an animal is sick, or they would treat that, to prevent animals from becoming sick and to promote growth. Now that is something that's already like regulated, that, you cannot be giving animals antibiotics within a certain amount of time of them going to slaughter, basically. So there's some regulation on that. But the big problem with use of antibiotics in animal agriculture is the risk of developing antibiotic resistant bacteria. Because if you're just randomly throwing a bunch of antibiotics at animals that aren't sick, what you're doing is you are creating whole populations of a particular bacterium that you can no longer treat with that particular antibiotic that we've been overusing. So government agencies and government policy has been set up to try to prevent overuse of antibiotics. But the good side of using antibiotics is, your animals aren't dying from infection, and they're not, you're not losing. If you're the farmer, you can look at it as not losing your investment in that particular animal by being able to treat them or prevent them from becoming sick. However, it is environmentally impactful, and impactful not only for other animals of the same species, but for humans as well. Pesticides keep insects and stuff from, consuming and ruining all of our food crops. So pesticides come in different types. We have herbicides, which kill weeds that choke out our food crops, antimicrobials that would kill things like bacteria and viruses, fungicides that kill fungi. And then we have biopesticides, which are derived from natural materials, so not chemical, but like biological natural materials, and then organophosphates, which affect the nervous system of different pest species. Pesticides we know can be fairly harmful, to animals, to the environment, and to humans. Pesticides can be quite toxic and quite damaging. So the use of pesticides is heavily regulated by the government in the United States. The Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, does a risk assessment to determine potential harm to human health that would be posed by exposure to different types of pesticides. So we don't necessarily want to do that because, again, it can harm the animals. It can harm, wild animals as well as farmed animals. It can be damaging to the environment, to our water supply, and also to us ourselves. So we want to minimize the amount if we're trying to sustainably, if we're trying to do sustainable agriculture, we don't want to be harming and ruining the environment or our own health by using pesticides. So there's alternatives to that, which is integrated pest management uses other stuff that you can do. So crop rotation, for one, is a good way to manage pests because pests usually like one type of crop but not another. So if you are rotating every other year, changing the crop out, you run less of a risk of a particular pest becoming really indigent and really really prevalent in that particular environment. So crop rotation is a good one. Genetically modified pest-resistant crops is another way to handle that. Using biopesticides that have less impact on the environment, or also utilizing natural predators in the environment to remove the pest species that you're concerned about. All right, so as far as reducing pesticides in your food, when you get food home from the grocery store, you have to wash it, especially with fresh produce. Not just potatoes, but all of your fresh produce you should be washing. Thoroughly wash and scrub fresh fruits and veggies with a brush under running water. That'll get off some bacteria, also pesticide residue. Peel and trim. So peeling stuff off the outside, like the skin of the potato off, really helps to get rid of a lot of the pesticide that's probably like on the outside of the potato. And then if all else fails, eat a variety of foods. So the amount of a particular pesticide that you're consuming is, you're probably not going to overconsume a particular pesticide. You'll consume a whole rainbow, a whole variety of different types of pesticides. So there we have it. All right, what about genetic manipulation, biotechnology? It's something that we've been doing for a long time, but basically where we take genes from other organisms and we insert them into a crop species or whatever to alter its ability to produce stuff, and alter, like, maybe make it more resistant to a particular pest, all of that kind of stuff. So we've been doing this genetic modification for quite a long time on various different types of plants. All right, so talking about some terms here, we have genetic engineering, which is the biotechnology technique that basically isolates a particular gene from an organism that produces something that we want, and then we put it into another organism. So genetically modified organisms are organisms that have DNA not only from their own gene pool, but also newly introduced genes through this artificial means, through genetic engineering. The first GMOs were used early in the 1990s to reduce pesticide and herbicide use. They also have, changed genetics to alter yields, to increase the nutrient content of certain foods, especially for people living in like developing countries where there's like one stable crop that folks particularly grow. like, cassava root or rice or whatever, introducing genes that cause those plants to produce vitamins like vitamin A or beta carotene that would help that population with a prevalent issue that they have, like vitamin A deficiency and blindness as a result of vitamin A deficiency. So there's that. As far as genetically engineered foods or genetically modified foods, there are concerns about them. They're not, all this stuff is tightly regulated by the FDA, the USDA, and the EPA. But what we don't necessarily know is how these genetically modified crops are affecting the natural environment or related plant species that are nearby. The ecological balance, we don't know what types of toxins are being produced necessarily. Are we introducing new allergens into the food supply? Are we changing the nutrient content? Is it safe to feed other animals? These are questions that still exist that we don't necessarily have good answers for. We don't have any present evidence that there are problems with that, but you never know until, down the line what problems might have arisen that you didn't account for in the beginning. All right, skip that one. This goes over the different agencies that oversee the food supply and what they do. So the USDA monitors basically like meat and eggs. The FDA oversees everything except for meat and poultry products. The EPA looks at the environmental impact. We have animal and plant health inspectors. We have the Marine Fisheries Service that oversees food inspection for seafood. The FTC regulates food advertising, and Health and Human Services, basically protects the health and protects the health of humans and provides essential services to Americans, including those who are disabled. All right, let's see. What are the politics of the food industry? Well, number one, the federal government is actually the nation's biggest food consumer. The federal government purchases a lot of food and then uses it for like the National School Lunch Program and the summer food service programs, emergency food assistance, and then child and adult care food programs. So the government itself purchases quite a lot of food and then distributes it to those in need. We do have a lot of lobbyists for a variety of different industries, but the food industry is no different. So they exert a lot of influence by giving money to various different politicians and lobbying politicians to vote in a manner that meets their particular desires as food manufacturers and so forth. So in 2009, there was a push to tax really sugary beverages because it's bad for your health. So to provide a little extra sugar tax there. It was blocked in Congress due in no small part to the amount of lobbying from various different, like soda manufacturers and things like that. All right, so how do we know how your food was produced? Well, there's labeling on various different products. So the USDA makes up their own labeling and the definitions for prepackaged meat products. So, USDA certified, whatever. Fresh poultry, free range has a particular definition for eggs and for poultry. Kosher is a religious designation. It's the processing of the food was overseen by a rabbi, and certain foods certified that certain foods don't come into contact with others. So like dairy and meat products can't come into contact with each other. Natural, no hormones, no antibiotics, all of that stuff would potentially be on a meat product or like egg product that you could see in the store. All right, organic, USDA organic and things that are labeled as organic. What does that mean? The USDA developed national organic standards, which basically say that organic foods are grown without the use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, no bioengineering, no irradiation. Pesticides and stuff can be used, but they are more organic pesticides, not so much that they're not using chemical pesticides, but they're using an organic approved natural kind of pesticide. As far as nutrition, organic foods are not nutritionally superior to traditionally grown foods, but the less use of synthetic pesticides and antibiotics have a benefit for you as well as the environment. The disadvantages usually a little bit more expensive than traditionally conventionally grown foods. This is the USDA organic seal, so you'll see that on things that are certified as organic by the USDA. Here's some other levels of organic labeling. So if it says 100% organic, it has to be 100% organic ingredients in that particular food. If it says made with organic ingredients, then it's at least 70%. If it says organic or displays the USDA organic seal, that means 95% organic ingredients. If it doesn't say anything about organic, doesn't have organic claims, then it's less than 70% organic ingredients. All right, that will end chapter 12. We will continue this discussion with chapter 13 in a moment.